I just spent 4 days in St. Lucia at an all-inclusive resort, and my hotel cost me exactly $0 out of pocket. But surprisingly, the biggest lessons weren't about points or how I booked it. They were about spending intentionally, trying new experiences, and learning how to finally let myself enjoy some of the money I've worked so hard to earn. Keep listening as I delve into the details about this trip and, of course, share all the deets on how I booked it. Hello, and welcome to the Wealth Minded MD podcast with your money best friend. I'm Dr. Lisha Taylor, and of course, I'm here to help you build wealth and make good money decisions so you can create the life you desire with more control over your time. As physicians, one of the most important things that we can do is make sure that we secure our income. That means that if we were, for some reason, unable to work due to a car accident, a medical illness, a chronic condition, mental health disorder, that we still have money coming in. Because a lot of our financial plans are contingent on our high doctor income. And so one of the things that you will need to do is make sure that you get long-term disability insurance. And I know, as well as anybody, that getting this is not necessarily fun, and all insurance agents are not created equal. However, Pradeep Otto and his team at PKA Insurance Group are different. They are who you want to contact if you need long-term disability insurance or life insurance. They have a reputation of putting people over profits and always doing what's best. If you're in need of life insurance or disability insurance, be sure to reach out to Pradeep and his team today. They will help you get the insurance you need with the service you deserve. All right. So, as I mentioned, I recently took this incredible trip to St. Lucia for my birthday. So, my birthday was in late June. So, I went in late June. I know it's probably late July or early August as this is coming out. But yes, I took this trip to St. Lucia. I'll tell you all the details. But I had a few travel lessons, if you will, that I learned. And of course, wanted to share how I booked it and all of that stuff. If you're listening to this thinking, oh my gosh, Lisha's bragging about yet another trip she took, that isn't the case. I actually wanted to share some of the details to help you out in case you yourself are like, I would love to take a trip to St. Lucia, or maybe you've been thinking about going to St. Lucia. Maybe you are somebody who is thinking about traveling, daydreaming about traveling, and wanting to maybe get some pointers on how to book things. I hope that you will find this podcast episode valuable and helpful for you. So one of the first lessons that I was reminded of is that Hyatt Hotels still offers incredible value. I think when people are getting started in the points and miles world, one of the questions that they will maybe ask themselves is, which hotel points should I collect? Should I be loyal to a specific hotel brand? Should I not? If I am willing to be loyal to a particular brand, which brand should I choose? And I will be fully transparent. I am not only loyal to Hyatt. I like to stay in Hyatt hotels and Hilton hotels for various different reasons. Hilton tends to have a larger footprint and has, a few luxurious hotel properties that I love. One example is the Waldorf Astoria. Another example is the Conrad. I love those two Hilton properties. And because Hilton has a bigger footprint, almost anywhere in the world you want to travel, there's usually a Hilton hotel there. I also have a Hilton credit card, so I can accumulate these free night certificates, and I love Hilton for that. But for this trip, I actually booked a Hyatt hotel. And so one of the things that you will learn in the points and miles space, especially when it comes to hotels, is that a lot of the hotels are owned by these big sort of parent companies, if you will. For example, Marriott owns a lot of hotels. I think they do the St. Regis and the Ritz and the Four Seasons, if I'm not mistaken. Hilton has lots of hotel properties that they own. I just mentioned the Waldorf and the Conrad as two examples. Hyatt has lots of hotel brands that they own, such as Hyatt Regency, the Park Hyatt, and that sort of thing. When it comes to hotels in the Caribbean, Hyatt has a pretty decent footprint. They own a lot of the hotels and all-inclusive resorts in the Caribbean. Not all of them, but a good portion of them. And so I knew, okay, I want to take this trip around my birthday. I wanted to be about 3 or 4 days, and we ended up going for 4 days, 3 nights. I knew I wanted to go with one of my friends from residency. So I was going with one of my, close friends. Where could we go? I wanted to go to the Caribbean because I didn't want to take this long, drawn-out flight. I know that if I'm traveling internationally, somewhere across the pond, Europe, Asia, Africa, that sort of thing, those trips are extremely expensive and need to be planned way in advance. But this trip was a little bit more last minute. And so I knew that I wanted to go to the Caribbean. And I started thinking to myself, what places have I not been before? And St. Lucia was on that list. I'd heard really, really good things. And so because I was going to the Caribbean and I was thinking about St. Lucia, I immediately was thinking about Hyatt. Hyatt, in full transparency, is one of my favorite hotel programs. I will be honest and say that they have recently devalued their war charts. So it costs more points per night than it used to in the past. So they're not the unbelievable unbelievable sweet spot they used to be, but they still provide pretty tremendous value. And it's one of the reasons when I was planning this trip and thinking about booking this trip, I immediately thought of Hyatt. For example, when I went to Tokyo last year, I booked that trip maybe like 3 or 4 months in advance, and I still found lots of hotel availability within the Hyatt program. And I ended up staying in Tokyo for 8 days and 7 nights using a total of, I think, less than 200,000 Hyatt points, which is actually not that much. Like you can get a new Hyatt credit card and probably get a sign up bonus that is at least half of those amount of points. Some of the cards, maybe even the full amount of points. So to compare that to like a Hilton hotel, I mean, staying 7 nights in a hotel, that probably would have cost like 400 or 500, maybe even 800,000 Hilton points and a similar amount in Marriott points. And so, I was able to get tremendous value staying in Hyatt properties when I visited Tokyo. And I wasn't just staying in cheap properties. I mean, I got a suite upgrade. I had executive club access. If you've ever been to like a lounge in the airport, think of the same thing, but there are lounges in hotels. And you might think, well, why would I want to go to a lounge in a hotel? Why don't I just go to my hotel room? Well, usually when you go to like a lounge, like an executive lounge in a hotel property, sometimes that's where they'll have like free breakfast. Sometimes they'll do like happy hours where they can get free drinks in certain times of the evening or snacks. You have access to a concierge, so will help you plan trips. And it's just another place that you can sort of hang out if you don't want to hang out in your hotel room. I'm not saying that you should plan a hotel stay just for the executive club access. I am, though, saying that it's a nice perk. And that when I stayed in Hyatt hotel properties in Tokyo, I stayed in nice hotels. I wasn't just booking the cheapest room. Like I had a suite upgrade, I had executive club access. I spent a fraction of the points that I would have spent if I had utilized points from another hotel program like Hyatt or Marriott. Anyway, my point is that Hyatt still provides really, really good value. And I knew that, which is one of the reasons why I was looking at the Hyatt hotel program when I was thinking about my trip to St. Lucia. One of the things that you should notice is that Hyatt has a smaller footprint than Hilton and Marriott. And because of their smaller footprint, they still want to compete for your business. And one of the ways they do that is by giving outsized value for hotel stays, especially for luxury and all-inclusive resorts. And this is, again, one of the reasons why I was looking at the Hyatt program when it came to my trip to St. Lucia. We ended up staying at an all-inclusive resort and it was great. I'm really glad because I paid $0 out of pocket. And so my takeaway from this first point is that you don't always need to stay in the biggest loyalty program. Sometimes the best value can really come from the program trying the hardest to earn your business. In this case, it was Hyatt. All right, my next lesson from this trip is that you do not always need to plan a year in advance. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but a lot of people in the points and miles space will say, if you want to get good value for your money, if you really want to take an incredible trip, you need to book that trip 12 months in advance. That is true for a lot of international vacations. It is true if you're going to go to Tokyo. I mean, I just gave an example of how I booked a trip to Tokyo only 4 months in advance, but that is not the norm. Most people book those trips a year in advance. For example, when I think a few podcasts ago, I talked about my trip to the Maldives, I definitely booked that a year in advance. If I was going to Africa, I would book that a year in advance. You get the best deals the further in advance you book it. It doesn't mean you can't find a last minute deal. It doesn't mean you can never book something 3 or 4 months out. It just means you're going to find the best deals, meaning you're going to be able to book business class flights with the lowest value or the lowest amount of points required the earlier you book it. So if you have a large amount of points or whatever, you can try to book last minute. Just you're going to pay more for the things that you're trying to book. And so everyone in the points and miles world says you need to book trips and vacations 12 months in advance for international stuff. But the truth and the reality is that real life doesn't work that way. Sometimes we're not able to book a trip 12 months in advance, or sometimes we are and our plans change, or sometimes you decide that you want to take a trip last minute like I did. I knew that I wanted to go somewhere around the time of my birthday. I had extra vacation days off for my job that I needed to utilize. I know a lot of people are still shocked at that. I am too, but that was the case. And so I decided only a few months beforehand, and I knew that going to somewhere in the Caribbean, I could probably find decent value. And so you didn't need to book a year in advance. For me personally, some people will ask, how exactly did I do this? Well, I went on the World of Hyatt website and I typed in my destination of St. Lucia. I typed in my dates that I was willing to go. And I searched to see what are all the hotels and resort options in St. Lucia. And there were a lot of them. And then I looked at, okay, well, how many points per night does each hotel cost and what would appeal the most to me? I knew for this trip that I wanted to go with one of my girlfriends from residency, and I was going to treat her to this trip. Like I was going to book the trip with points and I wasn't going to charge her anything. And so I wanted this trip to be pretty economical. And I was specifically looking for all-inclusive. Like I wanted the food to be free. I wanted the drinks and beverages to be free. I didn't want us to be nickel and dimed for extra costs or anything like that. And so for this trip, for me, it was important. I wanted to go to St. Lucia because I'd not been there before and I'd heard great things. And number two is I didn't want to have to pay a lot out of pocket for this trip. And so I specifically wanted an all-inclusive place.
And so anyway, I went to the World of Hyatt website, looked, saw that they had lots of options available, filtered by all inclusives, looked at the points per night, looked at reviews, and ended up finding one that I was intrigued by. We ended up booking a stay at Secrets St. Lucia. And at the time of me booking that, it was 25,000 points per night. And I booked 3 nights, so a Thursday through a Sunday trip. And that meant room for 2 people was all included. So I paid a total of 75,000 points, $0 out of pocket. How did I do that? I booked it using points that I had in my Chase account. So I have a Chase Sapphire Preferred card. I also have some Chase business cards associated with various businesses that I have. And I literally looked at that account, clicked on the membership rewards where I could see all the points that I had, clicked on it, clicked transfer out to partners, put in my Hyatt loyalty number, transferred out exactly 75,000 points from my Chase account directly into my Hyatt loyalty account. Some people do not take the time to do that step. They will like look on Chase's travel website and try to book it that way. When you do it that way, you usually end up paying a lot more points per night than if you transfer out the points directly and book the hotel directly through the Hyatt website. Hopefully that makes sense. And so my takeaway from this one is don't assume it's too late. Sometimes you can still book incredible trips. The hotels will have availability much closer than when people think. Okay. So if you're wanting to take a trip and you realize it's not a year in advance, that's totally fine. Just go, especially when it comes to hotels and trying to search on the Hyatt website. Oftentimes they may still have availability. So go to the World of Hyatt website if you're looking to stay somewhere in the Caribbean and seeing if you can find a really good deal that way. On the flights, at the time that we had booked our flights, we actually paid a lot more than I would have anticipated for the flights. And that's because there was a war going on in the Middle East. And so fuel charges for flights are really high. I think we paid a little over $1,000 each for our flights to St. Lucia, which is a bit expensive. I'm not going to lie. I am pretty loyal to Delta when it comes to domestic travel and travel to the Caribbean because I have status in Delta. So I tend to get upgraded for free and that sort of thing. But I will acknowledge that the flight we did pay out of pocket. I did have enough Sky Miles to book it with points, but I ended up paying cash for that flight. My next lesson from this was to ask for what you want. One of the easiest travel hacks, one of the easiest ways to make your trip even more memorable and customized is to simply ask. So I was going on a birthday trip. And so I emailed the hotel before we left and said, hey, it's my birthday, would welcome any complimentary upgrades that might be available. And they actually tried to make our stay even more memorable. Sometimes when you book it on the website, and you're booking it using points or using cash, there's a spot when you book the hotel that'll be like special occasions or anything that we should know. And you can put there, like, we're celebrating a birthday or whatever special occasion, whether it's an anniversary, a birthday, a holiday, or something along those lines. But I wanted to say that because when we checked in, there was a birthday sign on the door that said like happy birthday. When we walked into the room, they basically had like a slice of, I think it was like red velvet cake with the words happy birthday written in fudge on the plate. I think it was very cute. And it was a nice touch. And it was something that the hotels are willing to do and want to do. And so if you tell them what you're celebrating, they will make your stay even more memorable. I think I had mentioned when I went with my partner to the Maldives, I told them that we were celebrating his birthday. And some of the hotels had like bottles of Prosecco and bottles of wine and like fruit and chocolates and all these little goodies. And so if you are celebrating something, do not be afraid to ask for what you want because you just might get it. Another thing that, I told them about was like, I had originally booked one king bed and I mentioned before that I like to book 2 queen beds actually. And so I wanted to switch the room type, not to mention that I was traveling with one of my friends from residency. And although her and I are great friends, I wanted my own bed. And I'm sure she wanted her own bed too. And so I emailed the hotel beforehand and was like, hey, I booked a king bed. Can you switch it to 2 queens? And actually, when we were checking in, I asked them, like, hey, I know I booked a king. I just wanted to check in and make sure that you switched it to 2 queen beds. And they said that they didn't, but that they could. And so the lady literally like left where she was, talked to somebody and was able to switch the room type. And our problem was solved. One of the things that you need to realize is hotels really, really, really care about the reviews that they get because people like me search reviews when we're trying to figure out what hotel to book. And hotels will do a lot to earn a very good review. And if they can fix something beforehand, they usually will. And if they can make your stay even more memorable and special because they think that you might give them a good review, you should do that. And so don't be afraid to ask. Oftentimes hotels will like email you about paid upgrades. Like you can pay to upgrade your room. That's not something that I was interested in, but I am interested in complimentary upgrades. And you can use like AI or whatever to like craft a really cool email. But essentially, what you want to do is email the hotel ahead of time, let them know that you're really excited to stay there, mention what you're celebrating. If you're celebrating anything, mention who you're going with, like, oh, I'm going with a friend or something along those lines. Mention that you're really excited to explore the area. You would welcome any complimentary upgrades that might be available, and you would be more than happy to leave a glowing review after your stay. That is like a quick little email that you can send the hotel, and you will be surprised the response that you will get from these hotels trying to make your stay even more special because they want to earn a glowing review. Email the hotel, mention birthdays, anniversaries, room preferences, or whatever. You might just be surprised at what you get. All right, my next sort of travel lesson or whatever that I was reminded of is to read reviews, read it like you're researching the stock, if you wouldn't mind. I'm not a big stock picker, but my point is like read reviews. That's my point. Reviews aren't just about deciding whether a place is good or whether you should go there or not. Yes, that's a part of it, but it's also about preparing for what you might experience. Let me give you an example. So I was looking at reviews on St. Lucia, and I was trying to actually figure out how I was going to get us from the airport to the hotel. And normally you just take a taxi or an Uber, but I wasn't sure if they had Ubers or whatever easily accessible in St. Lucia. So I was like looking online to see. When I was searching and reading reviews and things, one of the things that I realized was that the resort was pretty far from the airport. It was like an hour and a half or 2 hours, something along those lines, and that the drive was not seamless. So many people mentioned winding roads and getting motion sickness. And that was extremely helpful for me to know because I am somebody who is very sensitive and gets motion sickness easily. And so for me, seeing multiple people mention that helped me become even more prepared. I was like, okay, I'm either going to wear a scopolamine patch or a motion sickness patch or a motion sickness bracelet or whatever. I'm going to be mindful of what I eat and drink prior to the car ride. I am not going to be on my phone when I'm in the car, like all of these things to sort of mitigate or decrease the risk that I was going to get motion sickness. And so, because I knew about that ahead of time, I was prepared. Still ended up getting a little queasy, but not sick. And overall, it wasn't that bad. And so one of the things that you want to do is make sure that you're reading reviews. Another thing that you might want to do before you go on a trip or as you are preparing for a trip is going on Viator. So Viator is a website slash app that you can use to book experiences in different countries around the world. And I use it especially when I'm traveling internationally. I remember when I was doing my solo trip to Spain and the south of France, I was going there for a wedding, but I was doing a solo trip in Spain. And because I was by myself, I was thinking, what could I do? And so I went on Viator and put, things to experience in Madrid. And I was able to book like this incredible walking tour. I did a tour through like 3 or 4 wineries when I was in Madrid. I think I also did like a flamenco show, like all of these experiences I booked through Viator. And when you go on Viator, you can put in like where you're going. And for me at that time, it was Spain. For me this time, it was St. Lucia, but you put like where you're going and they'll let you know of the popular experiences. You can read reviews. You can see how much it is. One of the things I love about Viator is that you can book now and pay later. So it will like save your spot. And then like a day or so before the experience is when they actually charge your card. So you have the ability to change your mind if you want to. The other thing I really love about Viator is oftentimes they are on Rakuten. So what's Rakuten? Remember, Rakuten is that shopping portal. Let's say you were going to buy a pair of shoes, right? Instead of going directly to Macy's to buy the pair of shoes online, you go to Rakuten first, and then you click on Macy's because Rakuten is a shopping portal, and you will essentially earn points that you can utilize to book even more travel. I know that sounds very convoluted, but my point is that you can sort of stack these deals. So for me, this time when I was in St. Lucia and I was looking for transportation from the airport to the resort, I went on Viator and literally typed in St. Lucia airport transfer. And I was able to read different experiences and see how much it was going to cost me and my friend to get a round trip ride from our resort in St. Lucia to the airport. And then I was able to read the reviews and all of that. I could do all of that on Viator, but instead of going to Viator directly, I went to Rakuten first and then I went to Viator. And the reason I went to Rakuten first is because at the time that I booked this, Rakuten was offering like 20% off essentially if you went to the Rakuten site first. I think Rakuten earns money from these different sites because they are technically sending customers to those sites. I don't really know all the back end. All I know is that when I am utilizing Rakuten, I'm able to earn even more points that I can then utilize for more travel later. And so I was able to stack this experience. I went to Rakuten first, then got transferred to Viator, typed in St. Lucia airport transfer, and was able to read the reviews and all of that. And I have used Viator a lot. And I know a lot of physicians and a lot of people in general who use Viator. When we were in Tokyo, I used Viator to book the streetcar experience where you essentially like drive go-karts through the city of Tokyo. That was super fun. I used Viator to also book a couple of tours when we were in Tokyo as well. When we were in Paris, and I went to Paris with a couple of my friends from residency, we used Viator to book our tickets to the Louvre Museum and the Eiffel Tower. And so anyway, I use Viator a lot. This is my, shameless plug to you. I don't earn anything from telling you about this, but this is my plug or whatever to like go to Viator to not only book experiences, but also to read reviews just so that you can be prepared for the experience. And I'll talk a little bit later about some of the experiences that we did in St. Lucia, but we also use Viator to kind of book even more experiences. So reviews help you avoid surprises and maximize experiences. Do not forget to read reviews. All right, the next lesson is decide what kind of vacation you actually want. And this would have been honestly like one of my biggest lessons of the trip because I think that there are two different vacation personalities. There are the people who go on vacation because they want adventure and they want to explore a culture or a city and they want to do all of the things and see all of the things. And then there are other folks who go on vacation to relax and they might be in a foreign country, but they're like going to enjoy their time in the hotel. They're going to like have a drink in their hand, laid out by the beach with a book and just like zone out. And so some people go on vacation to get adventure. Some people go on vacation to get relaxation. I am one of those people. It depends on the kind of vacation that I booked. But because I've been so busy and traveling so much lately, I actually kind of booked this St. Lucia trip as more of a relaxation trip. I wanted beach, book, relaxation, drink in hand with a little music in the background. My friend, though, she wanted adventure. She was so excited about this trip. And she was like, well, we can do this and we can do this and we can do this. And I realized, okay, we need to make sure that we're on the same page. And this is a word of advice for you. Like if you are traveling with somebody, make sure that you and the people that you're traveling with are on the same page about what this trip is for. I know a lot of folks with young kids who tell me all the time, hey, Lisha, the kind of travel I do now is different with kids than the kind of travel I used to do without kids. Without kids, maybe they would be go, 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 explore the city, book 20 million excursions in a day. But now with kids, they are like, okay, I know that I can book one experience or one thing to do each day. And so the travel with kids is a little bit slower. And so you might be in that phase of your life. Or the kind of vacation or trip that you want might vary depending on the time of year and where you booked it. Anyway, my point is that I wanted relaxation, she wanted adventure, and we realized quickly we were going to have to compromise or do our own thing. And we ended up compromising, and I'm so, so glad that we did. So we were there for 4 days, 3 nights, essentially. But, there's a lot of travel time in between that. And so we really ended up with like 2 full days with no travel there. What do I mean by that? Like Thursday was a travel day, Sunday was a travel day. So really we ended up with Friday and all day Saturday that we could really do a lot of things, if you will. And so what we ended up with was Friday as our relaxation day and Saturday as our adventure day. And it was like the perfect balance. I will talk about it in a second about why I'm so glad that we ended up doing both of those things. But my point here is that not every vacation needs to maximize productivity. Sometimes rest is the point. And other times, if you compromise into a little adventure, you might not regret it. And that brings me to the next lesson that I was reminded of, which is let yourself enjoy the money you've worked so hard for. And that was a lesson to myself because to be honest, I am like a naturally frugal person. Even when I can afford something, I still hesitate. Like I do not order Uber Eats and DoorDash very often because I do not want to pay all the ancillary fees. If it costs me, an extra $10, I'm sorry, I'll just drive there myself. There's been so many instances in life where I've looked at something, looked at the price and go, that's too expensive or that's too much or they're overcharging me and like gone out of my way to do something else. But on this trip, I had to like fight that urge. And that really came into a head on the Friday, which was our relaxation day. Like we had compromised Friday relaxation, Saturday adventure. And one of the things that we wanted to do and that I really wanted to do was go to the spa. I'm not a person who gets massages on a regular basis, but when I'm out of town and I'm feeling tense and I want to relax, I'm thinking, okay, maybe a massage might be nice. I think the massages were like an hour-ish long and they were around $250. And it also came with access to like hydrotherapy pools and the saunas and all of the things that you could utilize. And so really wasn't bad considering like how much spa packages and massages cost internationally when you're traveling. But still I kind of like hesitated when I heard the price. Like $250? I don't know. I could go back to the States and go to Massage Envy and get a massage for like $50, like or maybe $100 or whatever. Like, do I want to pay this much? And then I realized, okay, Lisha, maybe you should let yourself enjoy some of the money. Like the hotel was basically free. Yes, I had to pay for the flight, but the food was included and the drinks were included. And so I really had not spent that much money out of pocket for the trip. And I knew that I wanted to relax. And if I had the money on hand to spend that wasn't going to negatively impact my quality of life or my financial life in any meaningful way, why not spend the money? And so I ended up, I don't want to say caving, but I ended up spending the money on the massage. And oh my gosh, it was incredible. I'm so glad that I did that. The hydrotherapy pools that we got access to afterwards were amazing. I didn't go in the sauna because I was already hot, but my friend went in there and she really enjoyed the sauna. There was a relaxation room as well, and it was worth every penny. And so I am really, really glad that I did it. And I think that sometimes I myself can get so focused on saving that I forget the real reason why I wanted financial freedom. And I forget the real reason why I wanted to go on the trip in the first place. And so if you find yourself like me, where you're someone who's naturally frugal and it's kind of hard for you to spend money on pampering yourself, just kind of remind yourself, like, what are you saving for? What is life for? What is having money for if you're not going to enjoy it? Now, that doesn't mean spend everything and purchase everything, but it does mean that maybe you should give yourself more permission to enjoy the money that you've worked so hard to earn. All right. The next thing, or the next sort of lesson that I learned from this like trip to St. Lucia, is to try things you are skeptical about. Man, on this trip, there were so many things I was skeptical about. First of all, I didn't want to do adventure because I wanted to relax, but I'm so glad that I did the adventure, and I'll talk about it in just a second. And the other thing is there was this street party. So I don't know if you've been to St. Lucia, but if you have not, and maybe it's the same in other countries as well, but there was a street party. They were like, hey, the city is having this party in the streets. We will, provide you transportation to and from, but essentially there'll be a DJ, there'll be music, there'll be vendors. You should go and have a good time. I personally think that it's a way for other people in the country or, in the city to sort of make some money from tourists, because it seems like all of the resorts and all of the hotels told all of their people about the street party so that everybody was out there. And of course, there's different vendors and you can buy food and you can buy like souvenirs and things. But to their credit, they also have a DJ who was great and was playing a hodgepodge of various music, from pop to hip hop to, jazz, country, Caribbean music, all the things. And a lot of people had a great time. But I will say, I was skeptical. When the resort person first told us about it, I was thinking, oh, maybe. And then I was like, well, what time is the party? And she was like, well, I think it starts around 7 or 8 and it can last to 2 a.m. And I was like, excuse me. At this stage of my life, I don't tend to stay up very late. I'm the kind of person where I need comfortable shoes, plenty of seating, air conditioning, decent parking. Like, I got to check all of those boxes. And even still, I only want to stay for a couple of hours. Like, I'm past the point in my life where I enjoy staying up to 2 a.m. Like, that is not enjoyable for me. I'm also past the point where I want to stand up on my feet for hours and hours at a time. I'm just not in that stage in life. So I was a little skeptical. But, my friend was like, let's check it out. If we don't like it, we can leave early or whatever. And I'm so glad I did. Like, it was a cool experience. Did I think some of the food and stuff was a little overpriced? Sure. But it was cool seeing so many tourists and so many people of different countries, ethnicities, or whatever, all together out there and dancing and enjoying the music of the DJ. So that was awesome. I'm really glad that I went. I think we ended up staying there for a couple hours. And then I was like, I'm ready to go. And I was definitely like in my bed asleep by like 11 p.m. So I did not stay out late. I heard that some of the locals stayed out to 2 and 3 a.m. and that was just not the life I wanted to live. But nevertheless, I'm very glad that I tried it. The other thing was our adventure day. So the next day, all day on Saturday, we wanted to do some of the bucket list St. Lucia things. Like, when you visit the island, what are some of the things that people talk about that they enjoyed? And thankfully, the island sort of, our resort, I guess I should say, knew this company. I think it was called like Joy Cruises, that offered transportation to and from all of these staple St. Lucia things for like one all inclusive price. I think we paid, in full transparency, like $150 per person to do all of these things, which was amazing. So they essentially took us on a boat ride and we were able to see the Piton. So think of it like these huge rocks on the water in St. Lucia. They sort of reminded me of Cabo a little bit. If you've ever been to Cabo and you've seen like those big rocks on the water in Cabo, but those are called the Pitons in St. Lucia. And so we were able to see that. So St. Lucia has a volcano that hasn't erupted in hundreds of years, but they have a volcano, which you can see. And in the center of the volcano is also like a waterfall. And so we were able to go through that and we're able to visit and do like a mud bath. And in full transparency, I'm not like a mud bath kind of gal. Like, I don't enjoy putting dirt on my body. It just doesn't appeal to me. And so I was very, very skeptical about it. But our tour guide was like, no, try it. Everyone was trying it and talking about how great it was. And I was like, you know what? When in St. Lucia, let me be one with the people. And so I ended up rubbing, it's a mud bath, but it essentially looked and felt like clay, like gray clay or whatever. And then you could like draw different things on your friends or whoever you're traveling with in like a black clay. But you essentially rub this stuff on you, which I know sounds a little bit skeptical as you're in the bathing suit. And then they have the equivalent of like hot springs or like a hot tub that you dip into to wipe the clay off. And mind you, it was already almost like 100 degrees outside. And then you dip yourself in like these hot spring pool things that are also very warm. So I was like, I don't know, I'm already really hot. But anyway, when in Rome, as they say, do what the people do. And so I rubbed the clay on, dip into the hot springs. And let me tell you, my skin felt so smooth afterwards. I was shocked. I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't even want to do the mud bath. And so, I ended up trying it and now my skin felt super smooth. So that was like a huge success. Very, very glad that I did that. And then it was after we did the mud bath that we went to the volcano and saw the waterfall. We dipped in the waterfall too, and the water was super cold, but I'm glad that I was able to experience it, take tons of photos. It was really, really cool. After that, I think we ended up going to this place where they made us authentic St. Lucian food. It was so good. I went back for seconds and thirds. It was so funny. I was like eating, cleaning my plate and talking to some of the other people that we were on the excursion with, if you will. And one of the workers came up to me and was like, "Are you done with your plate?" And I was like, "Mm-mm, I'm still working." And then I waited for seconds and got more, and I was still working on my plate. And she was like, "Are you done yet? I want to wash the dish." And I was like, "Mm-mm, girl, you don't have to wait. I'm not done." So my point in saying that is that the food was excellent. I really loved the authentic food. Right outside that area, there was also like different animals. Like we were able to see like turtles and like snakes and beautiful flowers of all these different colors. It kind of reminded me of my time in Hawaii when I was in Maui, just seeing what looked like a rainforest and all of the beautiful flowers and trees and stuff. There even had an area where you could do like a fish pedicure. I'm not sure if y'all have ever done that before, but you essentially dip your feet into a tub and there's little like algae eating fish. They essentially eat like the dead skin off your foot. Sounded a little weird. In full transparency, I had actually done that before on a different trip that I had taken. So I kind of knew what it was going to be like. Still a bit skeptical, but ended up sticking my feet in the water with everybody else. And it was cool. It was kind of like the fish were kind of tickling my feet a little bit. I had had a pedicure before. I went on the trips. I don't think I had that much like dead skin or whatever around my feet, but it was still kind of cool. I didn't get bit. Nothing happened. I didn't get an infection. All is well. But it was cool to try the fish pedicure, if you will. And then we went snorkeling, and I love going snorkeling, especially when the water is clear and you're able to see different colored fish and different coral reefs and things like that. So it was great. My point in describing all of this is one, if you're going to go to St. Lucia, you should do those things. You should visit the volcano, the waterfall, do the mud bath, go snorkeling, like try some authentic food. Like you should totally do all of that. Take a boat ride through the pitons. Like you should see all of the things that St. Lucia has to offer, but you should also challenge yourself to maybe try some things that you're skeptical about. Whether for me, it was a street party or the snorkeling or the fish pedicure or the mud bath. Like I'm so glad that I tried these things. And I'm very glad that we had this day of adventure. That day started at like 8:30, 9 a.m. ish. And we were back to our resort at like 2 ish. Now, granted, I needed a nap and like a drink and like some water and like some food, all of these things once we came back. But I'm really glad that we went. And I'm glad that I was able to kind of see a lot of this like staple things or the main things that the island has to offer. And then my last, lesson is that it's okay to need alone time. And this was a little bit surprising to me because I remember I went to St. Lucia with my friend from residency. I had wanted to take her on a trip. I knew I wanted to go to St. Lucia and she had not been either. One of our other residency friends had just had a baby. And since, our friendship is going to change a little bit because one of our close friends just had a baby, I thought, okay, the two of us that don't have kids yet, why don't we go on a little trip and just sort of like have a good time and give our other friend some alone time with her newborn. And so anyway, I love my residency friend. We've actually traveled before. We do a lot of things together. But I will be honest, 4 days straight in St. Lucia together, sharing the same hotel room and eating most of our meals together and doing the excursions together and talking to each other a lot. Eventually, we both reached the point where we were like, girl, I love you, but I cannot wait to sleep in my own bed without you around. So, it was really interesting. You go through all of these nuances or quirks whenever you're sharing a room with someone, right? I like the temperature cold. She likes it a little bit warmer. You want some privacy to be able to watch what you want to watch on the TV and they want to watch what they watch on the TV. So it's these little things. And I've had tons of roommates in my life, so I am used to it. But still, the reality is that I am getting older and now I understand that girls' trips for me might mean that we all need separate rooms. Maybe there's a future trip that I am booking with a different set of friends that I'm like, okay, maybe we need a villa with multiple rooms in it where we all can have our own sort of space to get away from each other and get a little bit of quiet time or alone time. And it doesn't mean that we don't love each other. It doesn't mean we don't like each other. It's just everyone needs their space. And so my takeaway from there was like vacations should definitely fit who you are now, not who you were 10 years ago. And it's okay to need a little bit of space. So, to summarize, looking back, my trip to St. Lucia reminded me that wealth is not just about earning more money. It's about creating experiences that actually make your life richer. Some of the reminders that I had from this trip was to use my points instead of hoarding them. The longer that you hold on to your points, the longer they devalue, right? Because the hotels are going to get more and more expensive to book over time. And so you want to make sure that you're earning points, but also utilizing points. Instead of hoarding them, utilize them, transfer them out for great value. I ended up using Hyatt. You can transfer them out to whatever hotel program you desire. Be sure to ask for what you need and what you want when it comes to the hotels. They might just be willing to accommodate you. Make sure that you plan intentionally, read reviews, and look at what different experiences might be like, what hotel experiences or excursions might be like. Think about using Viator and stacking it on Rakuten. Don't be afraid to rest without guilt. Like if you need a little time away, if you want a trip of relaxation instead of adventure, that's totally fine. But at the same time, don't be afraid to try new experiences. I ended up going to the street party and I ended up trying the mud bath and other things. And I'm really, really glad that I did. Don't be afraid to spend money where it genuinely adds value. I mentioned earlier, like I was hesitant to spend money on a massage, even though I didn't pay any money for the hotel, drinks, or food. And so then I had to remind myself, okay, Lisha, it's okay to not be frugal in this moment and allow yourself to enjoy some of life's luxuries, which for me included a massage. And I'm so, so glad that I did it. And, remember that financial freedom isn't just about building wealth. It's also about using it to create a life that you can enjoy. For me, that includes travel, but that might be something different for you. At the end of the day, your money should support your life and not sit untouched while you're waiting for the perfect moment. So I want you to think about your next vacation and ask yourself a few questions. Number one, are you taking the vacation you actually want, or are you taking the one you think you should take? Maybe you should change your destination. Maybe you should think, do I want a trip of relaxation or a trip of adventure or compromise or a mix of both? The next question to ask yourself is there a way that you can use points or rewards to make the trip more affordable? Maybe you can and you just don't realize it. Maybe you can and you just didn't think about it. Maybe you can and you just haven't searched and looked on these different websites or whatever to figure it out. There is a website, I think it's called rooms.arrow, where it will show you different hotel deals that you can book on points. You might want to check that out. And then the last question to ask yourself is, what experience have you been putting off because you're waiting for the quote unquote right time? Life is happening now. If you've worked really hard, planned really well, built some sort of financial security or comfort, don't forget to enjoy the fruits of your labor. Hopefully you found this episode helpful. As always, thanks so much for listening to this Wealth Minded MD podcast. If this episode helped you think differently about travel or money or creating the life you enjoy, share it with a friend. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast. It makes it easier for other folks to find us. Thanks again for listening, and I can't wait to come back to you again next week.
Hello, everybody. It's me, Brooke. I'm recording a little disclaimer for Dr. Lisha Taylor. Just so you know, she's not a financial advisor, tax professional, lawyer, or financial planner. Everything you hear is for education and entertainment. It's not strict financial advice, So use your best judgment, chat with a tax professional, and all those other people that you need to talk to. Thanks for tuning in today. Keep cruising on your journey to wealth and wellness. Bye-bye.